Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the B.Invested Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch. This is a show unraveling the truth to the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. Today is going to be wild, folks. It's going to be wild. Sometimes I have wild podcasts and sometimes I have tame ones talking about super and talking about tax and talking about structuring. Today, we're going straight in without any fucking... there's just a warning, right? So you buckle up and enjoy. Today, I'm going to be talking about medieval peasants, right? And the world we live in. And to help you open your mind and open up the penile gland to go, hey, let's look at the world differently for what it is. We were born into the system, right? And I always think about it, right? Let's say someone had a kid today, right? That kid today, the world existed as everyone here knows it, apart from that kid. That kid never knew what happened beforehand, right? They're only going to be full of information that was fed to them from everyone else that's here, right? Chinese whispers, let's call it, right? But then the whole world existed beforehand, but the kid wouldn't see what it was like before 2020, for example, or before in 1990s, or before in another era or a different time. But there's things that roll over and we just assume what's around us has always been here, ever has been. A kid today would not know that life without a mobile phone existed previously, so on and so forth. So let's have a look at this. This is from Google, a feudal age peasant. According to historical estimates, a feudal age peasant would typically work around 150 days per year, which means a figure like 140 days could be considered fairly close to the average working days for a peasant in that area, depending on the specific region at that time. So if you were a peasant working 150 days a year, that would mean there's 50 weeks in a year that you would be working 3 or less days per week. If you're working more than 3 days a week or more than 6 months of the year, then you're working harder than a peasant did back in medieval times, right? It might sound harsh, but just think about it, right? The world was here before us, right? The world was here before any of us here, right? Doesn't matter if it's your great granddaddy, fucking Betty, Patty, whatever her name is, right? The world was here before all of us, and including them. Keys to remember about peasant work in the feudal age. Work was heavily dependent on the agriculture cycle, meaning that more work was done during planting and harvesting seasons compared to the winter months. Religious holidays. The Catholic Church mandated many religious holidays where work was not allowed, contributing to the relatively short working year. Demesne land. Peasants often had to work on their lord's land, demesne, for a set number of days per week. So if you wanted to live on the land, you need to work for a certain amount of time. It feels a lot like 30% of your money going to tax, does it not? Right? Just to survive, so you can live on the peasants' land that they were granted so long ago. Anyway, personal plot. While working on the lord's land, peasants also had a small plot of land to cultivate their own needs as well. So that's the first one here. Feudal age peasants, and just these are straight off Google, giving a bit of AI sort of overview that they give you. Peasants in the feudal age were the lowest class in society, working the land, raising animals, and also known as commoners or ones who work. Serfs, types of peasants. Serfs, peasants who were bound to the land and worked for the lord or the manor. Serfs were similar to indentured servants and in debt bondage. They could not be bought or sold individually. So let's just go back a set, right? What is a mortgage, right? What is a mortgage, right? You're a debt slave when you're signing up a mortgage, right? Go and look at the Latin word for mortgage, right? We'll drop the specific terms here right under the screen if you're watching it, right? Serfs, who was a type of peasant, were similar to indentured servants and in debt bondage, right? So the peasants were bound by debt. All of us here are bound by debt to our state, right? Our lords that hang over us, our government. We're probably going to get ripped. Can you hear the CIA calling us right now, right? Where someone's going to come and look at us, right, for this. If I don't survive past this episode, you know what's happened, right? But let's have a look at this. Villeins, peasants who were legally tied to the land owned by a lord, Villains had to give some of their food to the Lord in exchange for permission to farm the land. A part of your workings going to the Lord of the land, right? Oh no, the government's there to save us, aren't they, right? A freeman, minority of peasants who had the right to move around the country and work on the different land. You think about it, right? Like you can't even move from one continent to another, right? A large amount of Australians today were not born in Australia. They came from another country, right? If you've come from another country, you know that you have to go through the whole visa process, right? When I look at the visa process, what does that stand for, right? I know I've got the visa card in my pocket, right? Why do I have a visa card here for, right? Where's the visa working from, right? So technically the governments are trading us in their system, right? Let's have a look at it. Being real here. Drop some comments below. Life of peasants. Life was harsh with a limited diet and little comfort, right? When we think about the diets we have today, a lot of us are pushed to having the food from Woolworths, from Coles, from the big box supermarkets, right? Full of seed oils, canola oils, bad things that are going to make you sick. I'm not going down that channel, right? But if you want to go for a bit of a delve down, maybe we could get a nutritionist to come and talk about seed oils one day, potentially. Hey team, let's organise that, right? Leave that in the video, right? We'll get some people in to talk about seed oils. But the food we have, the quality of the food that we have is peasant grade food, right? Go and pick up a chocolate Easter egg. Your Easter egg should be like $50 for an Easter egg today, right? But it's not. It's only still $5 or $10 or whatever. But if you look at the ingredients of that, you're drinking, engine oil out of your car. So anyway, peasants had a high mortality rate due to hard labor and poor living conditions. Did you know in the Bible it says that Adam and Eve lived over 900 years, I believe, and Noah was over 900 years of the flood? I'm not getting into any religious stuff here. They said that the lifetime of a person was to be over 120 years old, right? But we're living in the best time in the world today, right? And we're living to 60, 70, 80 years old, right? Just go think about it. Could we live longer? How come you see some elites that look very healthy when they turn 99 and 100 years old and they're 90 years old? If you're looking at someone 99 years old, it's like your phone on 1% battery, right? It's like you don't see them all beefed up, right? How come these people do? They've got a different diet than us, right? Women were subordinate to men and were expected to run the household. Not going into that either. Peasants divided over labour based on age and sex. Peasants employed simplistic technology in their work. Feudalism. Feudalism was a system of land ownership and legal and military customs in medieval Europe. It flourished between the 9th and the 15th century. So if we think about it, 100 years old that great granny lives, right? That's just 6 old great grannies that have back to back lived throughout time. And you get back to this world that we live in, right? How's this information been passed on to us, and what is the world that we've come into existing in that our parents have led us towards, right? What was life like for medieval peasants? For the average person in medieval Europe, life was nasty, brutish, and short. Around 85% of medieval people were peasants. Today we have like 99%, and you have the 1% ruling class, right? You have the ruling class. You don't see them on TV. They're not your politicians. They're not the actors. They're not anything like that. They're the real elite. But around 85% of medieval people were peasants back in the day, which consisted of anyone from serfs who were legally tied to the land they worked to freemen who, as enterprising smallholders, untethered to a lord, could travel more freely and accrue more wealth. When you look at all this, are we looking about kings and queens and lords and different people, or is there a higher class than that again, right, which you don't get to see? If you manage to dodge the high rate of infant mortality and endless deadly diseases, your life is likely to be repetitive slog of farming the land to your local lord, regularly attending church and enjoying little in the way of rest or entertainment. If you did put a toe out of line, then you could expect to be punished punitively due to the strict legal system. Well, when we think about that, do you have much time for rest or entertainment in the world we live in, or are we debt slaves trapped into this system that we've been born in and led to believe, right? If you step out of line, what happens? We'll lock you up and put you in a cage for the next 10 years, 20 years of your life. Do you think you would have survived as a peasant in medieval Europe? Well, yeah, we're surviving now, right? So peasants lived in villages. Medieval society was largely made up of villages built upon the Lord's land. Well, let's think about that, right? Have you been to a new housing estate of recent times and seen those nice houses everyone's aspiring to rent as being a joint tenant or a tenants in common? When you sign a contract on a property, right? I know the game. This is what we're talking about. This is a matrix, right? I'm just trying to yell it out of the top of the top of the building as we can, right? I'm not sitting here saying that we're not trapped and enslaved. We're all enslaved, myself included. Everyone that's watching this, we're all. Maybe if we've got some, special people that are listening in, they might be like, "Fuck, this guy's onto us." But when you look at a new housing estate, everyone aspires to live in it. But do you own the land you live on? If you do own it, right? You go, "Oh yeah, I've paid up my mortgage, right? I'm not a debt slave anymore. I've paid out that mortgage." Well, do you really own it? Because if you don't pay your council rates or your water rates or your tax, or you don't pay the speeding ticket that you got for $20 or the $20 that you didn't vote and participate in the system, then they'll come and take your land by force and confiscate it from you. So, and it feels a lot like, I could picture a little village like a new housing estate where every house is attached with no eaves. Villages would comprise houses, barns, sheds, animal pens clustered in the middle. Fields and pastures surrounded them. National parks, Maybe I'm just delusional, right? Let me know. There were different categories of peasants within the feudal society. Well, you've got ones that live near the ocean on the other side of Sydney. You've got ones that live out on the west, Came from the west. Don't worry, guys. I'm with you. Villeins were peasants who legally sworn an oath of obedience on the Bible to their local lord. If you wanted to move or get married, they'd have to ask the lord first. In retort of being allowed to farm the land, villeins had to give some of the food they grew each year to him. Life was hard. If crop failed, peasants faced starvation. So let's just go back a second, right? I said beforehand, if someone's migrating from one location to another, one continent to another continent on the land, on the globe or the flat earth or whatever you want to believe the earth looks like, you had to ask the Lord first, the Lord of the land, the government. Mortgage, just going back, mortgage is a death contract. It actually stands for death contract. Mortgage is death contract. So it's a contract to your death. So these debt systems, they came from somewhere, right? We just have to go digging into the past and see where our life has led us to. Towns and villages in medieval period were unhygienic due to the lack of sanitation. Animals roamed the street, and human waste and waste meat were commonly thrown into the street. Disease was rife. Unsanitary conditions. I actually feel good that we don't have to deal with that. So there's a positive of the world we live in today. Most peasants were farmers. Daily medieval life revolved around the agrarian calendar, centered around the sun. Meeting the summer, the workday would start as early as 3 a.m. and finish at dusk. Peasants would spend most of their time farming their strip of land assigned to their family. Typical crops included rye, oats, peas, barley, which were harvested with a sickle, a scythe, or a reaper. Peasants would also cooperative with their other families when it came to common tasks such as ploughing and haying. They were also expected to carry out the general maintenance such as road building, forest clearing, and any other work the Lord determined, such as hedging, threshing, binding, and thatching. Yeah, anyway. Taxes were high. Here we go. Medieval era-style barn. Here we go. Peasants had to pay their rent on the land to their lord and a tax to the church called a tithe, which was 10% of the value of what the farmer had produced in the year. The tithe could be paid in cash or in kind, such as seeds or equipment. After you'd paid your taxes, you could keep what's left. Tithes could make or break a peasant's family. If you had to give up things you needed like seeds or equipment, you might struggle in the coming year. Unsurprisingly, tithes were extremely unpopular, especially when the church was receiving so much produce. Either way, Doomsday Book named the old Gramaic word doom, meaning law or judgment, meant that the king knew how much tax you owed anyway. It was inescapable. Houses were cold and dark. Peasants generally lived in small houses which normally consisted of one room, huts, blah, blah. Anyway, Justice system was harsh. Okay, let's move on to other articles. But you can see that there's a lot of history here, and I didn't know about this until I took a big deep dive into it and started researching about what did they eat and how did they live, and is our life much different? Yeah, we've got, Macca's, you can just drive through it at any hour of the day because you're working, you've got to come home, right? Who's working in the Macca's, right? But is that food the quality food for the nutrients that you need to have a very healthy and, fulfilling life? Food and drink are not simply consumed for nourishment, but they may reflect the preferences, resources, and indulgence of a group of people. Much of the information we have regarding the medieval diets come from archaeological discoveries, seeds, animal bones, shells, pollen found in middens. Rubbish pits can reveal much about the kinds of foods eaten by folk of the Middle Ages. Information can also be gleaned from surviving mercantile records, housing accounts, and lists of foods bought, traded, and sold. Not least works of literature that discuss celebratory feasts can offer insight to the luxury of foods of that day. The peasant diet. The typical peasant diet ate a grain-based diet. Don't eat meat, folks. Don't eat meat. Right? That was supplement with fruit and vegetable, when possible, with a meat or a poultry dish. Artisans, fishermen, and tanners and other skilled workers generally enjoyed a more varied diet than the poorer field workers. Fish was pickled, salted, smoked, or dried. Many urban dwellers would have kept a cow or a goat in their home and had a garden to grow fruit and vegetables such as onions, leeks, apples, pears, berries, peas, beans, and leafy greens. This produce was either eaten by the family or sold. Berries and nuts were collected seasonally. Meat was more readily available in the cities, where the animals were slaughtered. Whilst the best cuts were sent to the elite, meat was also enjoyed by those at a lower rank. Poorer folk ate frumentary, which was wheat porridge made with milk and served with meat. Bannock, a form of flat bread, is a common source of carbohydrate, along with oatcakes. The poor made their bread from barley, oats, peas, and beans. The diet of the poor improved as a direct consequence of the Black Death that ravished Europe in the 14th century. With fewer mouths to feed, there was now more food available per capita, and more meat was eaten by the wider public. So if we think about the world we're living in, they're trying to force us into, don't eat meat, you're going to die, cows are farting, whatever the case may be. Are they just putting us to a lower nutrition that keeps us sick, keeps us in the system, keeps us more suppressed, keeps our vibration? I'm not going in any hippie talk here, but does it keep our vibration and our energy levels lower? The rich man's diet. Despite the changes, the diet of the wealthy remained more diverse and exotic than that of the poor. The nobility would drink imported wine from France, and later, when trade had opened up with the East, they enjoyed pepper, spices, and other luxuries. Those who could afford it would eat white bread made with refined wheat, and generally enjoyed fresh fish, pork, whilst less well-off ate preserved versions of these meat, ham, and bacon. But most people in the Middle Ages ate with the seasons, and thus the rabbit in the winter, lamb in the spring, and doves from April and November. Other cases. In towns and cities, blah, blah. I'm going to be sitting here reading the whole thing here. Along with food, food, medieval men and women also enjoyed their drink. Ale was traditionally brewed by a woman, often to supplement the family income. Ale was a properly drink of hydration and was often unsafe to drink. It was brewed from barley, and the final product was thick and often chewy. So when we think about the food that is being put in front of us today that we are presented with, do you have choices over food? I'm going to go to the fresh food people and go and buy something healthy, right? There's a health food section in one of those main street supermarkets, right? Those big box supermarkets. There's a health food section. It's about 2 meter, 1 meter that way, 1 meter that way. You've got a health food section. If that's the health food section, what's the rest of the shop selling you? Oh, I've got a healthy sandwich. What? With pesticide, GMO on your food, sprayed with all chemicals to keep you sick, keep you suppressed. Put on white bread, full of sunflower oil, canola oil, all different types of oils. Think about the food that we're putting in our bodies today. Think about the food that the wealthy have, right? I know where they get the better food from. You've got to go and find that food because it's going to keep you more nutritious and keep you away from being sick. I used to have a really terrible diet, by the way. What was life living like in medieval society? Key points. Most people in medieval society lived in villages, the same thing as what we saw beforehand. Here we go. Let's have a look here. Peasants' everyday life. The homes are small, made up of one room. Children spent most of their time helping their parents with day-to-day activities rather than going to school. They worked jobs in the house, looked after animals, and helped grow food. Peasants also had to pay the church or the tithe. We've already gone through that. Life in medieval towns. There were not many towns in medieval England. Those that all existed were small by modern standards. London was the largest with a population of 10,000, and Winchester was the second largest with 6,000. There was many skilled craftsmen working in the towns. It actually sounds like a really cool place to live, right? Because who around your local area would be a skilled craftsman, a blacksmith, a tailor? You don't have that. You don't even have that nowadays, right? You don't even have the control of freedom of that, right? If all shit came to us and we had no power and no communication and we didn't have, who's going to make any of the stuff that we need on a day-to-day basis? Life in medieval castles. Following the castles were built across England to provide protection of William's soldiers and serve as a warning to local populations who may have been angry about their presence. Wooden castles were replaced over time with imposing stone castles, normally built on a high ground overlooking the town. Law and order in medieval society. There was no organised police force. The most law enforcement was organised by local people. Most areas, every male over the age of 12 had to join a group. Okay, let's go further. Here's a feudal system. This is a system of slavery that was there. The basic government of society during Europe during the Middle Ages was based around the feudal system. Small communities were formed around the local lord or the manor. The lord owned the land and everything within it. He would keep the peasants safe in return for their service. The lord in return would provide the king with soldiers or taxes. So if you think about it, right, we're constantly seeing the news. We're seeing, China's got a new ship on the outskirts of Sydney or on the outskirts of Tasmania. They're doing firing. Oh, it's okay, don't worry, right? It's very odd, right? So the deals that the government have made on our behalf have been, deals done with the US. We've got Pine Gap in the country. I'm not going into specifics of every part of our protection here, but the deals that have done for our country, right? Who is controlling this system, right? We have the people in the system, which we believe we've got a election coming up, but the selection is purely between, do you want this knucklehead or do you want that knucklehead, right? You don't have a selection of choice. You've got an illusion of choice, but you don't have real choice. It's interesting that it said the Lord owned the land and everything in it. He would keep the peasant safe. Service for the land. Under the feudal system, the land was granted to people for service. It started at the top with the king granting his land to baron for soldiers, all the way down to peasant getting land to grow crops. So if you think about it, crown land, all the land that we're buying is not crown land. You think you own it. You've got your bank. They're just stepping in for you with a death contract on there, with a mortgage. But then above the mortgage, you have your government. You got your local government. You got your state government. You've got your federal government. Then you've got the crown above that, right? So you've got the crown, which goes back to England in this instance, here in Australia, which owns the land. So you never own the land. You're just a tenant playing on that land. You can control it in the system that they've created, and you're only participating in one level of the system that's been designed for us to be able to believe, which is our mind control. The manor. The center of the life of the Middle Ages was the manor. The manor was run by the local lord. The local government. You lived in a large house or a castle. The government's housing, right? Where the people would gather for celebration or for protection if they were attacked. A small village would form around the castle, which would include the local church. Farms would then spread out from there, which would be worked by the peasants. Hierarchy of rulers, the king. The top leader in the land was the king. The king could not control all the land by himself. So if you divided up against the barons, in return, the barons pledged their loyalty and soldiers to the king. When a king died, his firstborn son would inherit the throne. When one family stayed in power for a long time, this would call it a dynasty. Right? So just think about the system. We look back and everyone goes, oh, gotta look after that old queen. She's a lovely old lady, right? Look at all the blood on her hands and the whole family tree that they've had, right? Anyway, I don't want to digress. The bishop was at the top of the church leader. The kingdom managed the area called the diocese. The church was very powerful in parts of medieval Europe, and this made the bishop powerful as well. Not only that, the church received a little tithe of 10% from the people. This made some bishops very rich. Barons and nobles. The barons and the high-ranking nobles ruled large areas of land called fiefs, F-I-E-F-S. They reported directly to the king, and they were very powerful. They divided up their land among the lords, who ran individual manors. Their job was to maintain an army that was at the king's service. If they did not have the army, sometimes they would pay the king tax instead. This tax was called a shield money. It's interesting when you go back and look at money, they call it the silver shield. If you look at gold coins from back in the English era, especially even in Australia, there's a thing called a gold sovereign, which is a sovereign money of the country. And it was a 1/4, 7.98 grams of gold, of real gold, 22 carats, not 24. And on the old coins from about 1880, none of this is in here, I'm just talking from my knowledge of this, had a shield on the front of it, right? And there was, the shield was for the protection. And if you look at a gang today, you could pay protection money, right, to a gang or a mob or, whatever, a club, association, right? Lords and knights. The lord ran the local manors. They also were the king's knights and could be called into battle at any moment by their baron. The lords owned everything on their land, including the peasants, crops, and the village. So if you wanted to go and take gold, talking about money, and you're in Australia and you want to go to America, or you want to take gold out of Australia and go to some little island or wherever, right, around the world, you can't take that money out of this country. You can't take silver out of this country. You can't take gold out of the country. It is owned by the land. So good luck. You think you own anything? You don't own shit. You're just a player in this game that we've been placed at the table to play. Not trying to be all negative, folks. Just trying to, share what I see from looking at all areas of the game where we've been designed to play at. The matrix, as we would call it. Most of the people living in the Middle Ages were peasants. They worked hard, had a rough life. Some peasants were considered to be free and could own their own businesses like carpenters, bakers, and blacksmiths. Others were more like slaves. They owned nothing and were pledged to their local landlord. They worked long days, 6 days a week, and often had barely enough food to survive. So they worked 6 days a week, which you're working 5 anyway, right, on average, and people have to go get a second job today, so worse, better off than that. But they didn't work for the whole year. They had times off throughout the year, so 140 to 150 days of the year. Interesting facts about the feudal system. Around 90% of the people worked land of peasants. Peasants worked hard and died young. Most were dead before 30 years old. It's a bit better here, but not getting that much better nowadays. The kings believed they were given the right to rule the land by God. This was called the divine right. Lords and barons swore oaths of homage and fealty to their kings. The lord held absolute power over the fief or manor, including the holding court and deciding punishments for crimes. Interesting. Let's have a look here. I think I've gone through a lot of these as well. Here we go. This one's a nice one. The feudal system. Key point about it. After conquering England, William needed to secure his control of the people of the land. He rewarded his closest supporters with large areas of land managed on his behalf. This was often referred as the feudal system. So if we think about Australia, when they took over Australia back in 1788, 1788, when they took over Australia, they gave, like, you see these areas where, like, Henry Lawson or, these people, right? If you go to like Parramatta or Penrith in Sydney or Central Coast, there would be names attached to these regions and be a lot of things named after these people. They would have been the people which, when they came here, it was split up into regions, right? Which would be like a Western Sydney, a Sydney, they had like a LGA, right? A local government area today would be a farmer's, one of these guys here, the closest supporters. So when Australia was started, that's how it started. And it came with a spin-off off this system, and that's what we're operating in today. But no one ever questions it. You just go to a 12-year indoctrination camp, which was provided to you by brainwashing to fit you and keep you as a peasant in this system. And we all go to this 12-year indoctrination camp and pledge our allegiance to it. And if we step out of line, we get kicked in the ass and you can't talk out and you can't say anything about the system. There was a huge divide in England between the lives of the wealthy nobles and the peasantry. There is still today, right? And it's going to get a lot worse over the next few years because of what's happening with control of these currencies that we've got. What do you think was the most important problem that needed to solve? Anyway, that's this little game in here. How was the system organized? So there's a little chart here. Just like anything, a good pyramid system. I'll get my editor to throw this on the screen. Just going back here. What is the feudal system? It says here, the phrase feudal system wasn't used at the time, but it was started to be used by historians from the 18th century onwards to try and describe what life was like in the Middle Ages. The inequality of the feudal system. There was great in medieval society because of the distribution of land and wealth. The nobility was able to raise large amounts of money from payments from peasants living on their land. Peasants this meant they were legally tied to the land. They worked and they could only leave with a lord's permission. We've gone through that beforehand. In 1925, consequences of the feudal system, and here we talk about that Magna Carta. You may have heard of that. In 1215, King John signed the Magna Carta, which was a document set out to how power and decisions would be made between monarch and the powerful nobility. It took away some of the power from the monarch and meant future kings or queens would have reduced power, would be unable to make all the decisions on their own. In 1381, peasants' revolt took place, which was partly caused by the peasants being angry over unfair taxes and restrictions on their freedoms. So we sit here in 2025 and everyone is getting completely fucked, right? And if you don't think you're getting fucked, well, maybe you wake up, right? Or maybe you're doing okay, right? But I think 90% of the people out there would feel life isn't good. Life isn't how it used to be. This isn't how it should be. And it takes time. I'm not saying everyone go and take over the government, right? I'm just saying that this has happened throughout history. You think your money's always been there? It hasn't always been there. You think that things have been? What were things like beforehand? What should it be like? If your life's not doing it, it's like, oh, I'm just going to wait for a politician to go and save my life. Oh, please, Mr. Politician, give me a... Right? That's not going to fucking save you and never save these guys either. So do something about it, right? Do something about it. Here's a good one, right? More than just a worker. Commoners were essential workers, were essential members of medieval society. In reality, they were the backbone of their communities. Their contributions to European societies through agriculture, husbandry, provided the necessary stability for the landlords needed to remain in power and avoid the collapse of their carefully structure. Medieval peasants truly had the power to change society within their own hands, and eventually they did. This would become overwhelmingly evident during the emergence of the plague and the peasant revolts across Europe. So if we look at that, and we think about the world we live in today, right? We live in little villages, right? The quality of our life is getting less and less. The food we're eating is absolutely fucking disgusting, right? The food at your disposal for 99% of the food that you can see along the way of you passing throughout your day is poison, right? And I'm not saying we're not going to the fast food restaurants or anything. I mean, even if you go to your supermarkets, go get yourself some vegetables and meat and the things that they're injected with and all that sort of stuff. There's ways to go and get food that's not in that system, but it comes at a cost, right? For example, if you go to a vitamin shop or somewhere that sells, a wrap, let's just say a wrap that doesn't have seed oil in it, you go and buy, I don't even know what they're worth for the bloody old El Paso ones or whatever. But if you want to go get one that's, doesn't have any of the bad chemicals in it, you're paying $15 for four little taco shells, right? That's a lot of money. You walk out for $500 and you get a paper bag full of groceries from one of these shops. Do you think that you're going to see King Charles eating a cheeseburger? Do you think you're going to see, you see, what's that guy, Warren Buffett, going, oh, I'm an old man, I eat on Diet Coke and all this. He owns those businesses. He's advertising. It's his branding to do so. He's a major beneficiary out of that. Do you see any of these wealthy elite, living that life? No, that life is designed for us to keep us trapped and not ask questions. They put the TV on, they put the entertainment there for us to keep us trapped in the system without stepping up and go, hey, I want to take control of my life. I want to be one of the free men. I want to be one of the free men out there. So I guess my whole point about today's podcast is looking at the world we live. It's not there to make you depressed. It's not there for me to rave on about, hey, we're fucking all peasants and slaves and stuff, but we are, right? And I started this podcast, No BS with Birchy podcast, to talk about the matrix, to fucking expose the life that we've been handed and the card that we've been dealt. And, property for me has been my escape to get out of that, right? They don't want you to have access to that. There's other things that I invest in. There's other things that I do. I'm open about that. And I think everyone should have more control over their life, right? Rather than being tied to this system, understanding how it works. If everyone stood up, the Jones Plantation, there's a link in the description of the Jones Plantation. I think it's a good watch for everyone to see. If everyone stood up, the system would collapse. You'd have control over your life. There'd be peace and prosperity like never seen beforehand on this earth. Well, at least for thousands of years since before this slavery system was put in place. But if you think you're not a slave, you're a free-range communist slave, just like every other slave that's ever existed. We've been born in this system. We're trapped in this system. From the day you're born, they sign you up to a birth certificate. They give you an ID, a serial number, a barcode that you're going to keep you trapped to that system so they can keep extorting you from your tax and taking from your life, and you're just trapped in this system. So if you want to change that, there's ways to change that. And I feel really depressing by just saying all this stuff. I actually feel, how can I end this podcast with something exciting, right? And I don't have that answer. I actually don't have that answer today. It's not often that I'm lost for words, but that is the system that we're born into. And there's a lot of people that are living out of that, but being aware of it, right? Being aware, being alert, being tapped into that knowledge and going, hang on a second, let's start questioning. Because I'm telling you, 99% of people out there just go, oh yeah, I've been told this is what it is. It's getting out of that and having questionable thinking and questioning for yourself. Today we're in a world where people just obey with blind faith because that's what they've been told to do. And the system has been refined so many times to keep us so indoctrinated, so enslaved to be able to go, yeah, okay, yep, thank you, my ruler. It's like you're running into the hands of your aggressor. So my only positive out of this conversation today would be understand it. Don't be upset by it. I look at it, I'm like, that's cool, right? Like, I want to be the free man, right? I didn't create this system. You didn't create the system. The system is here before us. The system will be here after us. But having control over your own personal life, that is what financial freedom means for me. So take freedom of your own life, put plans, processes, procedures in place to get yourself out of that system as much as you can so you can live the life you want to live without all this bullshit around you. If you need help on building out that strategy, you know where to find us, 1300-367-925, admin@B.Invested.com.au. I actually feel bad for saying my email or my phone number there because this is a really fucking disgusting podcast for me to put out. So thanks for listening. We'll catch up soon. Have a great week and go be happy and get your fucking ass out of the matrix. Catch up with you later. Bye for now.
Like Bilal said, man, we're stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it.